What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics, where I share my passion and over 40 years of experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. Today I'm going to continue this conservation project on this copy of Avengers number 1, the first appearance of the Avengers from November 1963 by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. If you are a comic book collector, this 60-year-old book should require no introduction. This copy belongs to a friend of the channel. In episode 1, we did an assessment of the book and developed a game plan for the conservation process. And in episode 2, we did a dry clean of the exterior of the book, front and back cover. Follow the link in the upper right corner if you want to get caught up with either of those videos before watching this video. Today, it's time to disassemble the book and clean the interior of the cover in preparation of aqueous bath. When we start a new conservation project, I always follow my 9-step comic book conservation process. If you are interested in working on your own comic book conservation projects, I highly recommend you check out that video for the overview. Let's get started. Obviously, it's a must to have clean and dry hands if you're going to handle any comic books, but especially important keys from the Silver Age. To remove the staples, we're going to find the centerfold, flatten the book out nicely. I use 3 tools here. 2 of them I purchased from Immaculate Comics. That's the Capable Staple Tool on the top, the Flawless Staple Tool in the middle. The one on the bottom is a Delrin block that I machined, and I just put basically kind of a pinhole in it. It gives me a little bit more surface area to flatten out the book than the Capable Staple Tool does. I probably should put a groove in it so that I could use it exclusively, but I use the Capable Staple Tool for this groove. So I'm pushing down on the one arm of the staple and the paper to stabilize the staple so that it doesn't move with respect to the paper and it doesn't stress the paper or give me little tear outs or tears. And I'm using the Flawless Staple Tool to just peel up the other arm. The Flawless Staple Tool has a Teflon coating, the idea there being that it won't mar the surface of the staple, especially where the staple might have a little patina. And those mars, they are something that CGC will see. They look at your staples with magnification. And that's just going to be kind of a red flag for them that this book has been messed with. Even though it's not against CGC rules to give a book that's been disassembled a blue label universal, if it's obvious, then they're going to ding you for the amateurness of the job. And it may then trigger something with the grading process that's undesirable, anything other than what we expected, essentially. Now I'm going to use this Delrin block again. It just gives me a lot more surface area and support so that I can flatten out the paper and really stabilize it so I know nothing's moving except the arm of the staple that I'm attempting to bend up. I usually start it with the Flawless tool, finish with my fingers or a fingernail. Works quite well. Sometimes when I do that initial bend up, the staples arms are not straight up and down, and I want them to be a little bit more straight up and down, so I'll adjust them at this stage. That's what you saw right there. Stabilize the paper, follow the staple tool, very gently. Try to bend that arm right at the spot where it was originally bent during manufacture. Finish it gently with my finger. Try to get it approximately 90 degrees. Doesn't have to be perfect, and I can adjust them later. And in fact, that's what I'm going to do right now. Stabilize the staple and just perfect the bend so that I can very easily remove these staples from the wraps and free that cover from the interior of the book. I'm fortunate to be able to work on books like this. Really glad that friends entrust me with the books. Obviously, this is a big key, and it's a pleasure and an honor to work on it. Now I'm going to use the arms to push, mostly push. I do a little bit of push and pull sometimes, but I want to do this very gently. I don't want to create any rips or tears in the paper, no matter how small. When you use a push and a pull together, it seems to go pretty well. I'm going to preserve both top and bottom orientation of the staple. It's on a piece of tape that's labeled. Take a moment to marvel at the Jack Kirby masterpiece that is Avengers #1. Again, gentle push from the inside, gentle pull from the outside. Manipulate the staple around a little bit to minimize any sort of pressure on the paper. And staples successfully extracted. I'll place them up and out of the way, making sure I leave no sticky surfaces to catch paper on. Then we should be able to just lift the interior right out, set it aside. So the interior of this cover has a few issues that I want to address before we do an aqueous bath. Again, you always dry clean before you wet clean. The reason for that is if you have surface soiling or contaminants, you want to just get rid of them. Don't solubilize them and potentially drive them deeper into the paper. If they're on the surface, remove them straight away. So again, remember I have a 10x magnifying ring with a light source in front of me, and I'm going to go to work first on this ink smear. I wasn't sure how well this would come up, but it actually came up beautifully. You can see that I picked all that up. It's on my eraser. So I'm going to clear that on my hobby mat, like you've seen me do before. Then I'll go back and just clean that area up a little bit. So that was kind of a major distraction, that ink smear. And to have it completely or essentially completely removed that easily is a nice sign. Off to a good start. That one really sort of stood out, you may recall from our review. Again, you know that when the eraser crumbs are coming off dark, they're doing their work. If they're coming off white, then you're not really removing anything. That looks a lot better. Let's get those eraser crumbs out of the way. We know they contain ink. I don't necessarily want those rolling back over my work. And then I'm just going to work around the book, mostly in the white areas. Of course, the interiors here are just monotone and white, so I don't really have any color inks to deal with here. I'm also going to feel with my fingers to see if I can feel any foreign bodies on the surface of the paper like we saw in the last episode. And I'm just going to work around, pausing from time to time to inspect my work, double check it. We're just trying to get any surface contaminants cleaned up. There you see there was a little dark spot in the hook of the arrowhead there, and I really can't get effectively in there with this eraser. The eraser's just too wide. So I'm just going to move on for the moment. And then I'm going to get my smaller eraser. This is 3.8 millimeter in diameter, so that I can get in there and erase that dot away. So you see it's cleaning up quite well. This is a step that doesn't often get done. When the book is still assembled, cleaning the interiors like this, as you bend the pages back to get in there effectively, can create spine ticks. So you can clean covers from the inside when they're still assembled, but it's much easier if the book's disassembled first. Notice that a lot of what we see in terms of dirt on the inside of this book are actually tide marks. Like, here's a bad tide mark. You can't really erase tide marks, but I'm cleaning it up a little bit in the hopes that when that tide mark was deposited, there was some dirt that actually is on the surface, that at least I get the surface layer out. I know the rest of that dirt is embedded in the paper, but I'll get at least the surface, and sometimes you're surprised and you can move a little bit of that tide mark with your eraser. Tidy up my workspace a little bit. And you'll notice I'm twisting the paper and bringing it back and forth quite a bit because my best field of view is right there in front of me. So I'm always wanting to be looking at areas that are well lit and magnified. There's a little stain there that had some foreign substance that cleaned up nicely. So we're actually able to get quite a bit done on the interior of this cover, which isn't always the case, so it's nice to be able to remove this again before we put it in a bath and solubilize all of it and just have it end up inside our paper. Much rather have it be trapped on our eraser crumbs in the dust bin. One of the things that's really noticeable when you're working on this under incident light, or what CGC calls raking light, is there's a lot of gloss gone from the inside of this book. Here I'm inspecting this dot. We noticed this in our walkthrough. I believe this is ink, and I looked at the outside to see where it was on Thor's cape to see if it was color touch bleed through. I don't believe it's intentional color touch, but it is ink. You saw it didn't come off. It is bleed through ink, so it's ink it's essentially a drop of ink that was dropped on the front cover. That's something we're going to have to deal with. Again, I don't think it's intentional color touch, but I don't want to give CGC any reason to give us a purple label on this book. So we're going to do our best to address that ink bleed. And the correct tool is not this eraser because that's in the paper. Erasers are good at removing things from the surface of the paper. Now I'm going to go over, no, I guess I'm not. I am going to move on to a cotton round, but before I do that, I'm just going to get rid of anything on the surface. I'm going to feel to make sure there's nothing left on the surface, and I'm going to get rid of all my eraser crumbs. Some of them have ink on them, and I don't want to be rubbing that around with a cotton round. So I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping here before I move on to the cotton round. Clean workspace is very important and will keep you from making a mistake or soiling up a book. So now it's time for a cotton round, and I'm just going to go very gently over the interior of this book. And unfortunately, my camera ran out of battery, so I don't have the rest of the video, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the results. So you may recall from last episode, very gentle drag of the cotton round across the paper, barely any pressure at all is what I want to be doing here. And unfortunately, I saw several areas where I lifted ink from the interior of the cover with a very gentle drag. You see in the word here, muscled body, the LED and the B are a little smeared, but that's dry ink. That means it's little granules that are just rolling around that aren't well adhered to the paper. And here's an even worse example on the back interior cover, where you have the 2 columns of the list of the contents of the footlocker. Notice how much ink came off on the cotton round, and there you can see most of that column from cruisers down to machine gunners. It's kind of smeared looking. Again, that's all dried ink. It's just rolling right off the paper, so it's not adhered at all. Here's a look at that ink bleed through. We want to deal with this. I was going to deal with it with an aqueous bath, but I'm concerned about that ink coming off. I'll show you the other side. This is right where the red comes down into that major shadow. You see a dark area. This is why I don't think this is intentional color touch, because if it was, the person wouldn't have got ink on the red and they would have done a better job filling in the black. Here's an image showing you how much of the interior has lost the nice gloss. But ironically, when you look at the area that's smeared, it actually has good gloss where that ink was coming off. So it's not just where the gloss was lost that we have no good ink adhesion. So in light of this, I think we need to re-examine the game plan with this book. I'm really not confident that we're not going to have a considerable loss of this ink if we do an aqueous bath with this book. Some of you commented in the earlier videos that you'd just like to see a traditional clean and press on this book, and I think you may be getting your wish. I need to take a moment and think about this, probably discuss it with the owner before I decide next steps here. There are a few ways to approach this, and I'm just not confident at the moment what the best path forward will be for this book. So I'm going to sleep on it, solicit some input from colleagues, talk to the owner before I make a decision about what to do next. So stay tuned. We'll have that in the next episode. And leave me a comment below and let me know what you think. That concludes episode 3. I sincerely appreciate you joining me today, and if you enjoyed this video, please take a few seconds to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment, and certainly subscribe if you haven't already. Most of the materials I used today are available from Amazon in the affiliate links in the video description if you need any of them for your own conservation efforts. Until next time, take care of one another.